Welcome and good afternoon. I'm pleased to call to order the joint meeting of the Suffolk City Council and Suffolk School Board concerning the school facilities needs assessment and attendance zone plan. In attendance from City Council, we have Vice Mayor Bennett, Councilman Goldberg, Councilman Fawcett, Councilman Johnson, Councilman Ward, and Councilman Williams. At this time, I'd like to turn over for introductions from the school side to the School Board Chair, Dr. Judith Brooks-Buck. Dr. Buck.
Good evening, and welcome from Suffolk Public Schools as well. I'd like to introduce the members of the Suffolk School Board. First, we have our Vice Chair to my right, Mrs. Phyllis Barham from Wheelerville Borough, and then to my left, Mrs. Karen Jenkins from the Cypress Borough, Mrs. Loretta Mayo from the Holy Neck Borough, Mr. Tyron Riddick from the Suffolk Borough, and Mrs. Sherry Story from the Chuckatuck Borough. Thank you and welcome. And right now we'd like to introduce our superintendent, Dr. John Gordon III. Dr. Gordon.
Thank you, Dr. Buck. It is my responsibility today on behalf of the school division and the school board to provide a brief overview of the CIP that was approved by our school board at our December 2020 meeting. One of the things we'd like to point out is our definitely thankfulness from the City Council for their ability to provide us money for preventative maintenance. One of the top lines that we see is $3.5 million that's been appropriated to the school division in the past for this year and the next year moving forward for preventative maintenance such as HVAC, roof replacements, and things of that nature. We want to make sure as we continue to progress along the 10-year cycle that preventative maintenance overall expenses actually increases to $6 million in 2 years from now, $8 million 2 years after that, and $10 million 2 years after that. From the introductory program and presentation from RRMM, they showed that roof replacement was a high priority. So we knew that as a school division, those are going to be some of the things that we're going to have to focus on basically for the next 10 years. And that can be a very expensive cost, which is the reason why we have an incremental increase as we move on the 10-year CIP. As we're looking at our CIP that was approved by the school board, we had some definite priorities for starting for the upcoming year, including operations facility Mount Zion replacement for phase 2, Northern Shores Elementary, a 2-story, 20 classroom addition, as well as a renovation for the College and Career Academy at Pruden. If we all remember from the presentation from RRMM and the facility study, looking at the facility conditions index, we also had several schools that are in need of definite replacement. We want to be able to state it publicly that it is the goal of the school division to replace schools instead of to renovate, as we will get more bang for our buck and be more efficient with taxpayer dollars. As we continue to progress on, schools such as John F. Kennedy, Forest Glen Middle School, Elephants Fork Elementary School will be next on our list. We wanted to make sure that we already knew there was a certain amount of dollars that had already been previously approved by City Council. For example, for the 2021-2022 fiscal year, $3.5 million, 2022-2023 fiscal year, $12.19 million, et cetera. Our school board was very aggressive in making sure that we addressed the needs as soon as possible, as we knew that delaying any of these major projects could be an additional $1 million to $1.5 million in overall expenses. We wanted to make sure that our entire school community, as well as our partnership with the City Council, with Al Moore, my counterpart at the City Council side as the interim city manager, understood the overall needs of our school division. Looking at projected enrollment, looking at current pricing for capital replacements, we believe that this is the best plan moving forward, which is part of the reason why we are here. So really thankful on the school division side, and at this point in time, I will turn it over to Mr. Al Moore, our interim city manager, to discuss things from the city side. Mr. Moore.
Thank you, Dr. Gordon. Of course, as we've looked at our CIP, a CIP is a plan, and if we've looked at the past, different allocations tend to change as we look on the data we have given. Of course, tonight we will hear on the school study, which is more of that data that will drive our CIP. But what's been, we did receive the school proposal. At your table, we do have what's currently in the proposed capital budget for council's consideration at their public hearing on February 17th. And what we've shown is sort of consistent of the previous 2 years anyway, where the only difference from Dr. Gordon's presentation, and ours currently is we have not moved up the operations center into the upcoming year. We've left it at year 2 as originally proposed last year. But what we want to do, and we've worked closely with Doc Gordon and his staff, along with our staff, along with the consultants, RRM Architects, and Cooperative Strategies on this report that you're about to receive on the priorities on the schools. It's a data-driven presentation, and I think it helps us guide us to discuss the future capital needs of the city or of the schools in the city. Of course, we do have remain within our financial policies as we develop the capital plan in the capital budget, which is the first year of the plan. So with that, I do appreciate the efforts that Dr. Gordon's and his staff and our staff has done working with our RMM and Cooperative Strategies over the past year. And at this time, I'd like to introduce Dwayne Harver to present that presentation on their findings, and which I think will help both the chairman and the school board, along with the mayor and city council, to make those decisions on the CIP as we move forward. Thank you.
Mayor Dimon, Dr. Buck, Dr. Gordon, Mr. Moore, members of board, members of council, thank you for giving us the opportunity to be back again and present to you all. We're excited to present you the results today and talk about some of the things I know you've all been anticipating. We're going to begin with just recapping the visions. We're looking at facility conditions. We've spoken to you about these two topics before a little bit. We're going to give you a little bit more in-depth understanding of the demographics, and then we're going into those facility options. So for the visioning, just as a reminder, we had that early on in our study, and the school division identified some things that were important to them. The all-in-one kind of classrooms, where these are very flexible, highly reconfigurable spaces that accommodate lots of different types of teaching and learning, collaborating, and to facilitate that, very flexible type of furniture that can be rapidly modified to personalize a classroom for different types of learning. Also, and that is the desire to at some point have a specialty center focused on the production side of visual arts and performing arts. Also, the branding, just the general theme that goes into schools, the desire to have that integral to the design process and not an add-on to schools after the fact. They also identified a number of schools, JFK, Kilby Shores, Elephants Fork, and Nansemond Parkway, as to be the top schools that they felt at the time were needing major renovation or replacement. And then lastly, to make sure that the community is heard, and that's part of the near-term planning process based on location, population, et cetera. So under facility condition, there are a number of different terms and definitions that you'll see in the charts of the study, and we may refer to this evening. Deferred maintenance, that's simply the maintenance, repairs, or replacement requirements that are needed that may be deferred due to the resources or to the level of quality, of deterioration, of the condition of the equipment or systems over time, and prioritizing those. The replacement value that we refer to in some of this is used in this instance for our facility condition index calculations. The replacement value here is based on in-kind replacement, meaning the exact square footage of the existing school. And so it's not to be confused with the new building options that we'll present later in the presentation. This is for our formula for comparison of schools. We did have 3 different categories of deferred maintenance. The high priority category is the one that we used for most of our facility condition indexes, and those were maintenance costs that are required or necessary within the first 0 to 3 years. And then we had 2 other categories of medium and low, 4 to 6 years and 7 to 10 years. So in our study, we evaluated the building systems and components, and we gave them a rating of poor, fair, good, excellent, and we used a number of different factors for that. Things like condition, age, estimated remaining useful life, maintenance, and so on. And that helped us determine a priority that put it in the categories that we just talked about. So the FCI, Facility Condition Index, is very simply the total deferred maintenance cost, and those are the high priority costs, category 1, over the current school replacement costs that I just mentioned, the in-kind replacement. So it just gives us a measurement tool to compare schools and prioritize the needs. So this chart is represents the facility condition indexes and the overall rating of schools. And as you can see here, those that have the red X's, Forest Glen, John Yates, JFK, Elephants Fork, and Kilby Shores, all of these were over 25% on their FCI ratings. And so they came to the top as the poor schools and the ones needing the priority. By the way, those that I show now in yellow were the same ones that were seen as the schools by the school board as their priority. So there's some overlap. They were on target with these schools. Nansemond Parkway got a facility condition index of 25.88%. We graded that in the fair category only because the main problem there is the roof. And so that just pushed it over a little bit into the fair, but it's borderline poor category. So if you take those 6 schools that I just talked about, this chart shows all the schools and the deferred maintenance costs that we've come up with, and they are in the columns of high, medium, and low priority. So if we take the high priority, right next to that I've included the facility condition index. And so you can see all of these schools are over 25%. And the high priority costs are shown as well. The reason I've made red text on these schools is because these are the ones that in the options we'll be talking about replacement of these schools as part of the options that we'll put before you to think about and discuss. The money that's associated with these projects, any one of these projects that got approved as a new replacement project, the maintenance costs would essentially go away for those. So the purpose in showing you that is that there's some reduction in these deferred maintenance costs for any school that is replaced that needs to be figured in. So at this time, I'll ask David Sturts with Cooperative Strategies to come up and speak a little bit about demographics.
Good afternoon, members of the city and division. Pleasure to be here. My name is David Sturts with Cooperative Strategies, a long-term partner of Dwayne and RRMM's, and happy to help facilitate today's presentation. On the demographics, what our firm did and does is we did a 10-year enrollment projection by school, by grade. I'm going to go into the methodology here in a moment, exactly how we did that. That is using the cohort survival methodology. And what we do is we look at 10 years of enrollment history by school, by grade, and we line that up with birth data in your county. And we'll walk through here in the subsequent slides so we can look at how many kids are born in the county versus show up 5 years later in kindergarten versus show up 6 years later in first grade, and then mature or, quote, survive to second, and then the next year to third, and so on and so forth. And when you look at those trends over time, you see that there's actually trends in those, quote, survival ratios between grade levels over time. And that's the secret sauce. That's what you look at. You look at the trends in that, how that relates to births, and looking at the overall development environment and seeing what's happening along the way. And it's science and art. And I'll explain the science and the art as we get into it here. This is something our demographer has done. We've counted for over 2,000 school districts across the country in 20 years. And so we also look at building housing permits and census data. I'm going to go through each of these data points and how they're considered. As mentioned, this is the cohort survival methodology. Across time, you will see the charts organized diagonally, and I'll walk you through that when we get there. And we look at those survival ratios and see what are the trends between birth decay amongst the grade levels over time. Are there changes in those trends? If you have a survival ratio of over 100%, that means more people are moving in to the school at that grade level than were previously there the last year. And same thing with birth decay ratios. If you have a birth decay ratio over 100%, people are moving in after kids are being born. You have more kids showing up than were born, and vice versa. Below 100% is you have some attrition. So we look at birth data. That is primary. The birth data that's available in Virginia Health Department was updated at the time of this study through 2017. So we look at the birth data by zip code. You can see that broken down. You can see how it is concentrated and what its trends are to the bar and to the right. It is a nice, even, nice calm C. It's going up and down, not too high, not too low. It's in a stable phase over time. Okay. Population estimates. You're looking at the census data here. We can see, let me be clear on this. The birth data is a direct input into the system. The census data is part of that context that we look at. There's the way the data is updated over time. It's not a direct input that we use, but we do use it as a frame to understand what's going on in terms of growth, both overall in the region and specifically within. And so you can see, based on the color coding here, how growth is to greater or lesser degrees, and in some areas declining across the division. It's varied, as well as what the population estimates are for the census. And it's estimating a total of 873 children, ages 5 to 18, increase or about just under 5% between 2019 and 2024. You will see in the projection, of course, the projection using the cohort survival methodology is projecting less than that coming in that same time frame, but for multiple reasons. One, you're never going to capture 100% of the kids being born, or the kids estimated. And two, this is a census level, high level estimate, and we're using specific birth and cohort survival ratios specific to your schools, specific to your districts, so it's much more pinpoint, which is why we use this as a reference point. Housing data. So when you look at your housing data over time, you see how you peaked right before the recession and then declined and didn't really regain that previous level. As you look over time, you can see single-family and multifamily housing developments. These are new developments every year, approved every year. The building permits. There's a total of 4,314 single-family permits, averaging 431 a year over this period of time, and a total of 1,849 multifamily units, averaging 185. Combine those together, it's a total number of housing permits issued over this period of time. Now, what I really want to point out is I want you to hold that data in mind as we go to this next slide. So we're talking, over about 5,200 units of housing. Your enrollment declined to 185 students over the last 10 years. Over this total period of time of all those permits coming in. There's multiple reasons why this typically happens. One, new housing, and forgive me if I'm saying things that are elementary to you, but new housing oftentimes is creating housing for intra-division movement, not necessarily new folks coming in, but folks moving around. And broader issues of, it's just folks getting older, not having babies, built out environments that aren't growing quite as much. You're more recapturing and redoing old stock. you're not having that kind of growth. And this is a very typical finding to see that relationship between the housing and the enrollment. Your enrollment is, for all intents and purposes, flat over the last 10 years. 185 drop over 13 grade levels is very nominal. What you want to look at in this sheet and for projections is you want to look at the color bands. The way that we color code these is the blue are the relatively lowest numbers, smallest numbers, and the red are the darker the red, the relatively higher number. And so what you look at is read these charts diagonally. So you look at the kindergarten enrollment of 2010-11, which was 1,148 students. Those kindergartners became the first graders the next year at 1,143. You lost a net of 5. We don't know who those 5 were. We don't know why. Did you just lose 5? Did you gain 15 but lose 20? We don't know. But what the projection model does, why the cohort survival methodology is so accurate and so something that's so standard in the industry, is that it doesn't try to identify specific variables in what has happened and then hypothesize what those variables will do in the future. It's phenomenological. It looks at what has happened and what that means in terms of the oscillations between grade levels, the survival ratios, birth decay, and so on and so forth, and then uses that baseline, given what we know of the rest of the city, to then project what's moving forward using actual data without trying to isolate variables, thereby providing a higher degree of confidence. So what you see is you had a relatively large band in that early year, K1, 2, pushing itself through, followed by a relatively smaller band in the kindergarten cohort of 2013-14, 2014-15, 2015-16, smallest there in 2018-19. You see it goes from 1148 to 933, and then that blue starts that banding down. You see the diagonal band there. So what we call, these are waves and troughs in historical and projected enrollment. And those movements are relatively larger and relatively smaller cohorts pushing themselves through the system. You see the highest band, the red band at the 9th grade. That's common in nearly every single division I've ever worked with. And why? And that is students repeating 9th grade. That's students moving in to try out your district from a neighborhood private or a charter school in 9th grade. As a confluence of factors, why 9th grade is almost always has the highest survival ratio. And then the drop off there is student attrition after 9th grade through the 12th. Okay, enough on the historical enrollment. With the projected enrollment, we do run multiple models for you. We provide you a recommended, low, moderate, and high. Here's the difference. The recommended is based on the most recent trends in the district. This is our demographer's art, if you will. This is the demographer looking at those patterns in the survival ratios, seeing what has happened in her thousands of school districts working, not just in Tidewater, but we do work in Norfolk and Chesapeake and Virginia Beach and around. But around across the country, and then using those trend lines to anticipate moving forward, all things considered, development and what was known as the area and how those trends tend to work together in the survival ratios. The low, the moderate, and the high are more modeled approaches that our proprietary software spits out based upon statistical modeling using different weights to the survival ratios. So you get your low, moderate, high, and recommended. And this is how it looks. When you look forward on the projected model there is your band swings from about a low of just over 12,000 projected to a high of about over 16,000, almost 17,000 projected. And the recommended is projecting a low to moderate increase over time based on all things considered. And so here's what that looks like. Coming off of, to run these numbers, you want to look at the 2019-20 enrollment to get these numbers in the bottom right-hand corner. But based upon the 2019-20, the pre-K-12 enrollment is projected to grow by 370 students through the 2024-25 school year. We then look ahead to 29-30, and you're looking at a growth of approximately 673. Using this data, what we highly recommend is that you make your most firm plans looking at that 5-year data. That has the highest degree of planning accuracy. It's based upon actual birth data. It's based upon the most recent trends. The 10-year is solid, but I would say the best practice is to do these projections every year to 5 years and do that 5-year plan look ahead as your highest degree of confidence. And one thing to note here, that 47% of those 370 students, almost half of that growth was anticipated to have happened this past year when you had a 5% decline. But that 5% decline is most likely an anomaly. I work with districts all over the country. We've done straw polls. Districts are looking at 1 to 5% enrollment decline. The majority of that you had at the elementary level. Again, absolutely commonplace across the country right now. And knock on wood and everything I can find, we get back to normal as soon as possible, and we can anticipate that most of that enrollment comes back. How much? I don't have the crystal ball. But all folks that I'm working with and talking with across the country are anticipating the majority of those folks coming back once all the doors are open and we can finally throw these in the trash. Your projection is the growth of 370 through 2024. That's a key planning number that we're looking at. That growth is not even. The next few slides will show you how that growth is organized by school and by geography. So if you can see there, if you're looking at, we use 25 students or 1 classroom-ish as a barometer. That yellow bar there, that horizontal dash, is showing growth or decline within 1 classroom's worth of kids, 25 kids over an entire grade level, entire school rather. If it's more than 25 or more, that's 1 classroom or more, that's a decline or increase. You can see that the majority of the increase as you scan down all of your schools projected is accounted for at Florence Bowser and at Nansemond River High School. And then you can see where there's flat decline and kind of bumping along everywhere else to different degrees. Some moderate growth at other schools as well. But those are the lion's share of it right there. When you look at it sort of segmented by where the schools are physically across the district, you can see that growth concentrated in the north. There you see 379 growth. That's because Bowser and Nansemond River, that's where a lot of the growth is. You see 35 student total growth in Central Suffolk and a decline of 44 total in South Suffolk on the net, but that's uneven. Okay. When it comes to facility options, Dwayne's going to kick us off here, and we use this data in developing some ideas for you, just the process to set this up. Ladies and gentlemen, we're presenting these options to you for feedback and discussion. We take that feedback and discussion back, work with division, work with city to refine the options into a cohesive set of recommendations. We need your input first, and then we can come back to you with some draft recommendations based upon feedback. So Dwayne, you want to set us off here? And then I'll be right back.
So we've already talked about some of these definitions, so there's no need to go through those again. We just defined what program capacity is here, the number of students based on Suffolk school standards that a school can reasonably accommodate. The actual enrollment, self-explanatory. Utilization is the enrollment divided by the capacity in a percentage. And so all of these you'll see as we go through these charts that are coming up. I just wanted to speak briefly about the factors, 2 key factors that drive school construction costs. And so the first being dollars per square foot. So in our study, we did not use just out of the blue estimates. We went to historical data for actual schools that were constructed in the state of Virginia, public schools from the Department of Education, and retrieved the data to come up with dollar per square foot averages. Now, as we did that, we wanted to make sure that we were true to the area that we're working in. So we used a weighting factor. We used a factor of 5 for any of the schools that were here in the city of Suffolk. We used a factor of 3 for regional schools, meaning Hampton Roads schools, and then a factor of 1 for those outside of Hampton Roads in the state of Virginia. So our averages would not be had influence from any expensive Northern Virginia schools, things like that. They're more close to home. The second thing is square foot per student. So the square foot per student determines the size of the school. Now, in our efforts, we were trying to make sure that we had good alignment between what's in the UDO for square foot per school and what goes into what informs the capital improvement plan. So what's currently in the UDO, and something that we will recommend as a change to that, is to make the square foot per school more granular. Right now it's shown as 1 square foot size for elementary, 1 for middle, 1 for high school. But in reality, as a school gets larger, it typically becomes more efficient, so the square foot per student changes for a very large middle school, say, versus a smaller middle school. So we developed this chart that you see so that, let's say, for the elementary schools up to 750 students, we assigned 145 square foot per student. For 750 to 1,000 range, 125. You can see as it's getting bigger, the square foot per student is going down. It's getting more efficient. And then those categories and sizes that are outside of what the Suffolk Public Schools is recommending, we note those and don't assign a square footage to them. We did the same thing for the middle school and the high school. And so I just wanted to explain the basis. We're as scientific as we possibly can be on the square footage per student and the dollars per square foot to come up with the costs that we've shown.
Thank you, Dwayne. Okay. When we develop options, this to me is the most fun part of my job. It's getting to play with the data and benchmark off of what other districts are doing around, divisions are doing around the country. And it's that creative space where you think what could be, what are the benefits, and what are the challenges. This, I liken it to a sandbox. You've got your constraints on one flank and you've got your opportunities on the other, and the space between is what we can work in. We don't work outside of that. We don't work outside the vision for the division. We don't work outside of the constraints based upon the data. The intent here, just to set this up, is to provide you a data-driven, vision-informed set of options that are practical and implementable. It's not a wish list, it's a plan. And we're very specific on that. We take a lot of pride in that. And it is very much an iterative process. This is not the first version you're seeing. It's gone through lots of rehashing and rethinking and what ifs and what are the secondary and tertiary implications. This is one of those important iterative moments where we need your feedback, okay? So again, one more framing thing and then I'll dive into the weeds. So Dwayne mentioned that category 1, the 2, the 3 deferred maintenance issues. The sum, if you notice that, was just a tick under $225 million. And so, per Dr. Gordon's point, when you look at the efficiency of renovation versus replacement, repair versus replacement, what we look at here is the options proposed leave you with the need to account for about $93 million worth of category 1 through 3, all the needs, as opposed to 225. And the reason is that those near-term 225, fix and replace moments are replaced with rebuilding the schools. And then you're moving from fix and replace, which has a life cycle anywhere, depending on the components, of 10 to 25 years on average, to rebuilding, you're looking at 50 to 100 years life cycle on top of that. So there's that forward investment that we're looking at, trying to minimize the need for deferred maintenance that will need to be accelerating as big buildings get older, and more looking at when it's possible to avoid those sunk costs and look at more long-term investments. Okay, into the weeds. When we look at the high schools, your key data points across the top, and you can see this probably much more clearly on your print-off than you can on the screen right now, but you see all of the schools, their age, their square footage, their acreage, their program capacity, how many mobiles or portables they have, the different costs in the category of repairs, total replacement value, and then the sum of category 1 through 3 divided by replacement value is your FCI, your cumulative FCI, and the FCI based on category 1 shows you that acute need right now that Dwayne was talking about. So as you look ahead in utilization as well, we noted green, in blue those facilities that are projected to be underutilized, have surplus space in them. Red, those that are over 100%. So big picture at the high schools is that all your 3 comprehensive high schools are built within the last 30 years and in pretty good condition overall. Overall, your high schools are in the target utilization range. We target 80 to 100% of total utilization as the sweet spot. If you're 101, that's not necessarily cause for alarm. You got to talk to the building principal, see how that's working. If you're 79, that's not necessarily cause for alarm. The further you get away from those edges, the more you're looking at you have an issue of too much or too little. So you have an imbalance is what you have here. You have Nansemond River High School growing and becoming overutilized, even more so than it currently is, to the point of over 120% utilized, which is a structural overutilization requiring a boundary or capital solution to address. Once you get to that level, you're in it. It's time we need to look at a solution. When you're really below 75, you get to 70% utilization, you got surplus space. I look at below 80, but especially when you get below that, you're looking at Nansemond River at 122 and Lakeland at 65% utilized. That is a big gap. Overall, you're fine, but you're imbalanced. So what the options look to do is they look to keep up with the deferred maintenance, with the condition of these schools, while seeking different solutions to balancing that enrollment. So what do? You have 3 different pathways. This is a choose your own adventure book from middle school, if you remember those. 1, you could rezone high schools to balance utilization, and that's theoretically possible. I'll be honest on this one, it's practically quite difficult given the location of Nansemond River right on the southern end of its border. Actually drawing that boundary will be quite challenging, and we can go through that later, but it's an option. Another option, B, 400-seat addition, including a new gym and cafeteria, because if you just add a bunch of new seats and you don't expand the core, it creates a mismatch. You don't have the sufficient common spaces to address your increased population. So increasing that to Nansemond River High School to reduce overutilization, it costs about $15 million. The third option is to do the polar opposite of option A and build a new high school at a tune of $119 million. Now what it implies on a utilization standpoint is right now, just to flip back, your total utilization projected 2024 is to be 83.4%, going up to 90%. That's in the doable range. You could theoretically make it work on a boundary change, but again, you've got some challenges just due to the physical location of the school and their boundary and how that bottlenecks up in Nansemond River. If you go to option, what the heck happened? I'm sorry, I went a little bit too far ahead, getting ahead of myself. Option B there, what you end up doing is your projected utilization goes down to about 87% overall in 2024. If you do option C, it drops to 72%. So what that means is option B gets you the capacity relief exactly where you need it, and you're reducing your utilization, but still in that sweet spot. Option C is the betting on the growth in the near term for the long haul, because you would be creating the space with some significant surplus to begin with. But there are benefits and challenges to each. Our role is to facilitate the process and to provide the analytics and discussion for you, and to elicit that conversation, take that feedback, and then from your feedback, develop the recommendations. So look forward to getting into those discussions. Middle schools. Okay, so the key factors in our middle schools. We have some condition issues, as well as utilization imbalances. You see the reds and the blues in utilization over there on the right. You have some imbalance, particularly between Forest Glen and JFK. And if you look at Forest Glen, for example, its utilization, high utilization, is driven not by the enrollment growth there that's unique, but because that school is substantially smaller than its neighbors. So you're looking at a capacity of 410, as opposed to, say, you look over at JFK at 650, Yates at 785, Kingsford at 1150, Fred Cherry at 800. Forest Glen is the smallest of the lot, and that is accounting for its overutilization. And then you look at the condition needs. You have some very high condition needs at Forest Glen, JFK, and Yates, both in the near term and especially as you look over those three categories of need for the long haul, where if you look at a 10-year view, the cost to fix all of that relative to replace it is over 50% of the replacement value of the building, just in fixing up what's broke and what will break. So Forest Glen, I mentioned the condition needs there. Our utilization on the net is good, but we are imbalanced. Okay. So we have two swim lanes of options here, two different types of options with and without rezoning. Options A, 1, 2, and 3 do not require any rezoning. Option B does. Here's the difference. If you look at option A, what we are keeping your existing portfolio, the schools where they are, and what we're doing is rebuilding them at slightly larger capacities at Forest Glen, JFK, and you add a total of, you have a total of 2,000 capacity or total between all of these options. And that is rebuilding Forest Glen, JFK at 600, building Yates at 800. We're looking at site availability and so forth as part of the drivers for those capacity differences. And with their age and condition, you have a long-term investment here rather than keeping up with those deferred maintenance, which, by the way, that 10-year cycle, you keep these buildings, that 10 years becomes 20 years, and you're going to keep chasing that. And so this is looking to get ahead of it. Options B, what they look at is consolidating Forest Glen into JFK into your newest elementary, your middle school size rather, at about 1,200. And when you do that, you would be looking at the Forest Glen site or a new site as a location there, just given site needs, population, densities, and so forth. And what you were looking at there is consolidating Forest Glen and getting that one off the portfolio, putting those seats into a rebuilt middle school on Forest Glen or a new site as mentioned. Okay, and then rebuilding John Yates at 800. So Yates is the same in both. You see the cost differences were about 111 to 97.5 million between options A1, A2, and A3, and B1, B2. The utilization impact district-wide is exactly the same. It's the exactly the same number of seats, just organized differently. Okay. Elementary schools. So just like middle schools, but more of them, and the same condition, same data needs. You have utilization imbalances, and you have high condition needs. And so you see the sea of red and a little bit of blue over on the right-hand side. That's you've got under and over utilizations. And what we're looking at the condition side as well is you have some high condition needs at Elephants Fork, Kilby Shores, and Nansemond Parkway. And so what we're looking at is some options that address those in different ways. You'll see a couple pages here. So in this first set of options, this would consider if you were to proceed with the option to rezone, what could you do? This looks at some portfolio changes. So you could rebuild Kilby Shores at 1,000 capacity, rezone portions of Pioneer and the majority of Elephants Fork to a new Kilby Shores at that size, and then you are repurposing Elephants Fork for another use to be determined. So that's where your necessary boundary change comes in. you're drawing some more kids into the new capacity, and you're taking Elephants Fork offline. Option A2 is to accompany that is rebuilding Nansemond Parkway at 800 capacity, rezoning portion of Florence Bowser to the new school to account for the future growth. And then A3 and A4 are variations on the same theme. It's building additions to Northern Shores up there tucked away up in the northern corner. It's overutilized. Rezoning is therefore, of course, obviously challenging, just given the location, the isolation there, and it needs help. And so the question is, do you bring it up to your more current size, or do you make it even bigger? And the 200-seat addition, including cafeteria expansion, would account for the projections as they are. The 400 would be building in additional capacity for additional projected growth above and beyond what we have in the projection. And you see the utilization impact there going from 95 down to 87 or 89%, based on what you do at Northern Shores. Now, if you're looking at elementary options that do not consider changes to the portfolio of schools, that therefore do not require rezoning, what you would be looking at is rebuilding Elephants Fork at a 750 capacity, rebuilding Kilby Shores and Nansemond Parkway at 600 each, and then putting, again, you have that 200-seat addition at Florence Bowser and Northern Shores, 100-seat addition to Pioneer. So we're spreading out some smaller additions at the other schools to account for those pockets of overutilization, bringing those schools up more to all similar sizes. Right now you have quite a spread in sort of the sizes of schools, so this starts to even the playing field out on those capacities. The size, the cost difference here, 97 to 101 million, based upon whether you do B1 and B2 or B1 and B3. And you toggle between the two, you're looking at 73 to 77 or 97 to 101 for these sets of elementary options with and without rezoning. So, what's the sum? When you look at the total needs here, after we talked about $225 million in deferred maintenance over 10 years that Dwayne and team identified, bringing that down to the options, reducing quite a number of that to leave you, reducing about $132 million of that, reducing you down to $93 million of deferred maintenance. The options, the low estimate of the costs range from 187 that you would add the $93 million to, up to, if you built the high school and did all the highest cost options, that's 338. So the sum range total over a 10-year period of these options, to, if you want to think of it that way, are between 280 million on the low end and 430 million on the high end, and that's in 2020 dollars. Once we work with you, get your feedback, continue to work with the division and city in refining these options into the recommended package that fits together, then we will be looking at scheduling, packaging, inflation estimates, and getting sequencing and how the plan could take place, how the plan might need to be funded, and what strategies to support it. So with that, I'd like to open it up to questions, comments.
Thank you for your presentation. I think the way we'll proceed, if everybody's in agreement with it, School Board Chair, maybe we start at we don't have a table, and we used to have a table. We just go from one to the other, kind of spread out here. So maybe we'll start at the back of the room and move our way forward, unless you think, Mr. City Manager or Superintendent, would you like to interject something before any other comments?
Well, Mayor, Chairman, of course, you've just received the different alternatives in the range of what we're looking at. There's work to be done, so as we look at the first year of the CIP, I think what we're talking about here is looking at the outer years and moving ahead at that point so we can structure these improvements in a proper fashion, and also to look at funding options as we work with our financial advisors and see what is feasible and what type of schedule maybe they can fit on that's affordable to the city, doesn't jeopardize our AAA bond rating, and keeps us moving forward.
Dr. Gordon?
Yes, thank you. First of all, I want to thank RRMM and Cooperative Strategies for this detailed work. This is a plan that has been basically put forward with several different steps over the last year to 15 months or so, in conversations with both Mayor Duman and for our school board chair, Dr. Brooks Buck. This will really serve as our strategic plan moving forward. And one of the things that I think is very important to point out to everyone here in attendance as well as our school community is the different options that are available to us, the practicality of it all, definitely keeping in mind the AAA bond rating that Mr. Moore had described, but also the overall need for our schools. And one of the key points that we want to be able to drive home is the issue of building new schools versus current maintenance issues. And when we address building new schools, we really take care of those maintenance issues. So any decisions that we make really need to keep that in mind. I love the fact that we have a range here. There are several different options for us to be able to look at. We also were able to really identify the different areas of growth within the city, within our schools specifically. I like the fact that we also will be able to determine the differences between a 5-year growth plan and a 10-year growth plan. I'm very happy that Cooperative Strategies mentioned the importance of really focusing on the 5-year growth plan because that's our most important need. And we all know in almost every locality that schools are a major reason why people move to an area. Schools, new businesses, things of that nature. So if we are serious about making sure that we have the premier school division, not only in the Commonwealth of Virginia, but also the country, us being able to really follow along with the needs of this plan is going to be critical moving forward. So I just want to thank both RRMM and Cooperative Strategies for all of their hard work in putting this together.
Thank you, Dr. Gordon. We'll start with Board Member Riddick, please.
I don't have any questions at the time. I just would like to ask that we really strongly consider using our existing land and that we don't focus on purchasing new land, that we would use existing land with any directions we would like to go with moving forward.
Okay, Councilman Goldberg.
Thank you, Mayor. Mayor, this is a lot of material. I appreciate the material that's been presented. I'd like to study it more, get right into it, and with that, I'll just have to pass.
Thank you. Board Member Mayo.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Dillman. In looking at the reports, I'd like to thank our MM and Cooperative Strategies for this information, and it's a lot to absorb. So I want the opportunity to study as well and research and in our discussions among the board, and we'll take a look at all of the suggestions that you have given us. It's a lot to absorb and a lot to think about. Thank you for your extensive work, and I don't really have any questions right now, but thank you so much.
Board Member Story.
I just have one question on page 32. So it's on, I just want to make sure I'm reading this right. I feel I am. Option B1, to rebuild Elephant's Fork, Kilby Shores, Nasman River, all three of those rebuilds plus demo is 86 million.
Yes, ma'am.
So that's less than 30 million each plus demo. Is that correct?
So yeah, rebuilding Elephant's Fork at 750, rebuilding Kilby and Nansemond Parkway at 600 capacity each. Just about 86.7 when you round up.
Okay. I just wanted to double check on those numbers. I mean, that seems, okay, thank you. Thanks. I don't have any other questions at this time. Thank you, Mayor Duman.
Okay, Councilman Fawcett.
Thank you, Mayor. First, RRMM, thank you for this report. It's real detailed, and I certainly echo the rest of the comments that there's a lot of information to absorb here and probably a lot more conversation on where we go in the future. The one little comment I'd like to make is when we talk about rebuilding schools, if we're going to go down that trail, and this is by no means the end all, but I would prefer that we build a school that we can take and build one school and combine close enough for another school to be a part of that process. We're not that way. We might get more bang for our buck to get more out of school buildings, because if we go out here and build 3 or 4 schools, it's going to be an absorbent amount of money. So I think if we think about it and try to get those schools closer, even if we're on the border or on the line rather than redistricting the school, I think we could get more of the students from each side of that to comprehend and get us premier school instead of having to build, an Elephant's Fork and so on and so forth. So I just look at it, where could we go to condense the amount of building of schools, but get enough where two schools may be able to merge into one school, and that way we could continue to build. And certainly looking at this, if we build some of these schools, we're going to have to look at where are we going to place them, because they're not going to be able to be done in their present location in some cases. So we'll look at it, and thank you for your time, and I appreciate the presentation.
Councilman Johnson.
Very good report that I think is exactly what we asked for as far as what's been put in it. I think our staff, city staff and school staff should be excited that this is coming forward, because it's going to allow everyone to put it together where we are heading. Then the big question comes up, how do we fund this? How do we make this actually happen? I hope we'll take into consideration now is the time, if we're going to close schools or consolidate schools or change areas that we know the growth is going to be in, it needs to be a part of this plan. And we need to make sure that we're going to go forward with a plan that will actually work for the city, keeping our funding in mind. And I agree with Dr. Gordon. We need to build the best school system in the area. We need to let people know that Suffolk is on the move. So I'm excited for this, and I think the money can come forward, but we're just going to have to do a whole lot of conversation. Thank you.
Councilman Ward.
Yes, thank you for the plan. It's very intense. And I want to really, I'm concerned about them classrooms. I think it's in here somewhere about the classroom we had approved for Northern Shores. But thank God I got Dr. Buck, and me and her had a lot of conversations going on, and I know she'll steer me in the right direction also with the best thing for not only our borough, but the whole city of Suffolk. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. First of all, I just want to thank council as well as school board for making this first joint meeting happen, and I want to let you know that I appreciate RRMM and your staff for a wonderful report that you've put together. I'm going to piggyback on Mr. Riddick that we are hoping that at least John F. Kennedy look at that site to see if it's possible to either redirect where we put the school, but put the school at the same place. If we're gonna redo that, which is our hope. And all our kids deserve a state-of-the-art school, and I am looking forward to having this plan go forth and working with City Council to make it happen.
Williams.
Yes, I'd like to thank RRMM for a great presentation. I don't have any questions right now. This is a lot of information to examine and digest. I'm looking forward to reading through it and get a better understanding of what you've presented. Again, I don't have any questions right now. Thank you for a great presentation.
Yes, thank you, Dennis and your team. Y'all have done an excellent job. I think we've worked with you for many years in Suffolk, and you've given us a lot of good options to investigate. There is a lot of information in this, as everyone has said, that we need to probably study in detail. But I like a lot of the option ideas. I do want people to remember that, as Dr. Gordon said, we have a lot of ageable buildings. It takes a lot to maintain those buildings. Millions and millions of dollars, as we sit here, could be used, for roofing, HVAC, and all of those things. So we have to think about, in terms of that, what is the wisest thing for us to do as we move forward. Invest in old buildings, trying to patch them up, and that's what we've been doing for now on many years. I've been on the board for 12 years. We've built 3 new outstanding schools in this city with the help of the city council for funding, and they're beautiful, state-of-the-art schools. I want to see all of the children in our city guaranteed the opportunity to have the same, facilities. We know technology today is a big thing, and this virtual world we're in is more evident every day. And I want to see that before I leave this earth. And I hope that we will move in that direction to think through all of these things. We can only use money one time, but we need to use it very wisely. And we need to think of the future where we locate these schools for the next 20, 30, 40 years. And think of the cost that we are incurring until we are able to build more schools or, make some of these options come true. And we have a great superintendent who has a lot of great ideas, and the board is willing to work with him, and I think we will be able, with the help of the city, to move us forward. But these options, some of these I've thought of myself over the years, But I've lived in this city a long time, 60-some years, and I have seen schools placed in the wrong location and not servicing the needs of our city. And I hope we as a board, and I know Dr. Buck and I have this concern, will move in the right direction to change some of those things with the help of the city. Thank you.
Vice Mayor Bennett.
Thank you, Mayor. First, I'd like to thank the city, interim city manager for sending some information out on this earlier. I took some time today to sort of go over the information, which is the same that you were going over here today. So I think it's a great package, and I agree with school board member Jenkins here. I'm just concerned, how many schools do we have that have land that we could add on or build new schools rather than have to go out and purchase land? And we looked at that. I know.
So the majority of the options, in fact, every single option stipulates a build where you are as a basis. The only one, let me go, hit the wrong button. So we are looking at the potential at the middle school option B1 is the one option looking at potential new site, but that is as an alternative to building on your existing site, which is the primary, which is the starting point. So you look, that's the starting looking at building on Forest Glen just because of the site availability there, or a new site is what was proposed. But that's the only mention of new site.
I'll just add to that we test fit all those existing schools and put a school footprint.
Yeah, they probably can't hear you.
I'll just say that we did test fit these sites where schools existed already to make sure that we had enough space to put a new school, and they all had enough space, it appears at this time to us.
Okay, that's good to know. And also, the comment about the schools being old, 50-some years old, and we are continuing to spend a lot of money in maintenance to keep them open. I think that's something that we really need to look at, the value of doing a new school versus what it's costing to maintain the old schools. So we need to look at that when we start doing our planning, the difference in the cost, because I looked at some of the numbers, right quick, and it's costing a lot of money to maintain those schools that could go toward a new school. So I think we really need to look at the overall picture when we're looking at this, is how much money we are spending to the old schools to maintain them rather than to build a new school. And I know we're not going to be able to build all the schools in 1 year, at one time. That's the other thing we're going to have to look at is prioritize which one is the worst, which one is costing the most to maintain it. So somebody's going to have to prioritize where we're going to start. Because everybody sitting around the table know that we're not going to be able to do them all at one time and be within budget. So that's one of my concerns is how are we going to move forward with looking at this and saying, hey, this is the number one priority that I think we need to look at as far as budgeting purpose. We can have a lot of wants, but it takes dollars in order to fill those gaps. So that's one thing that I would like for us to take a look at. But
Yes,
it's
sir.
a lot of information here, and I'm sure that, Mayor, we'll probably be meeting again before anything is taking place on this, because this is not for this year anyway, this is out years. So we'll be able to really digest some of this and talk about it, and with the schools to make sure we all are understanding the needs, what we can afford, and how we can move forward. And I thank you very much for your presentation.
And if I may, I misspoke briefly. There is one other option of new land, and that is the high school. The new high school would require new land, and so those are the two in there that might consider that. And if I may, on that last point there, generally speaking, industry-wide, there's some cutoff points that you look at, is that replace versus repair. And if you're looking at just those near-term category ones, it's about 25%. Once you reach about 25%, you want to think, well, maybe that's portending other things coming down the pike. When you look at that 10-year lookout, if you're over 50 and certainly over 65, 66 range, those are industry standard cutoff points to strongly consider replacement versus renovation.
Thank you. I wanted to say thank you so much for this meeting. I think it went well. I appreciate the council, Mayor Duman, and the council for working with us. We have Vice Mayor Bennett established some priorities in the report that we presented to you from the school system, the projects we have to get started right away, and the things that we want to get started and get finished so that we can move forward. So we have given you all some things to consider in the near future, present things, and in the near future. Of course, we've talked about the priorities that we have, and they are in our CIP that we've presented to the city to give you some idea of what we want to get started on. We have and are committed to working with the city because we're partners. We've worked together now for several years, and as our vice chair indicated, we've built 3 beautiful new schools since I've been on the board in the last 8 years, and we look forward to working together with you. We want our relationship to continue. The other thing that I want to do is say thank you to RRMM, because you have indeed affirmed the ideas that the school system has presented over the years. You've looked at the target schools, and when I looked at the report, I saw the highlighted yellow things that are right in line with the things that we've identified as concerns that we've had. We are also committed to working with the city, the state, and the federal government. I mentioned at a meeting that we had before, our 3rd District Congressperson, Congressman Bobby Scott, has put forth a Rebuild America Schools Act, which has some grant money in it for helping to rebuild some schools. So we're committed to working with the city to see how much of that money we can get to help us, because schools all over the country, public school systems, cannot fund all of this by ourselves. So we're committed to working in partnership with the city to help us get whatever we can do to help us get some of that money, because we realize that the city doesn't have enough money to go on with all these things, all these projects on your own. So we're committed to that. City manager, we're committed to working with you with that and anything else we can do. And we just want to say thank you for what you've done, and we're going to work with you to do whatever we can do to make this come to a realization. Thank you so much.
Hey, thank you. And once again, I'll wrap it up. Thank you for your presentation. It was well anticipated, let's say. I know it's been about 1.5 years in the making, and you had to address a lot of issues, specifically the facility study, student generation rate, projected growth, costs involved in both redistricting and not redistricting, and just looking at the plan. I'm actually kind of excited. I don't get excited about much, but a lot of the proposals and options that you've presented, and I think everyone needs to understand that this is a data-driven survey, and we paid pretty good money for it, I'll say. You know, a handsome sum for you to compile this information, analyze it, and make a recommendation based on what it is, the statistics. Where's our growth now? Where's it going to be in the future? Determine what facilities we have available and provide options to do it. So, as Chairman Buck said, we have, and everybody said, we have limited resources. I mean, if we're the federal government, we could just crank out money, but we don't. We're required to have a balanced budget. So, looking at the FCI, which you did, which takes the facility analysis and rates those, along with the needs of the school system, you know, I'm just looking at it at the surface, and I'm looking at the high school options that we have. Nesman River wasn't way up in the FCI, but when you look at it and say for $15 million, we can more or less knock out a high school problem, and that is one high school that's over capacity. That pretty much takes care of high schools for $15 million. And in the big scheme of things, I mean, I'm not going to say it's a drop in the bucket, but to actually start and complete and solve the system's high school issue for hopefully the next 10 or 15 years, in my mind, it's huge. Looking at some of the options available, the consolidation process. You know, we fail to realize sometimes that it's not just the consolidation itself, but it's the operational cost. The operational cost is huge. If I ask the superintendent to give me a number of what it costs to do this school, and how much does it cost to staff this school, by having the larger schools, the operational cost, not only will it escalate every year when you have it, but it's ongoing. So I think that's huge also in the process. And the key is that we get a grip on what we're doing and try to prioritize and come up with a long-term strategic plan that we can revisit each year to update based on the school's needs and our ability to fund. And the end result should be that we are able to accomplish as much as we can, as soon as we can, with the resources that we have available. So, like I said, I'm kind of, and I assume a lot of this too, you know, we don't know about mobile units and where there's particular issues that only the school system would be able to address. So we need to take the information that you've compiled it, along with the everyday issues that the school system's having, the maintenance issues, just like yourself, I look at some of them, and if it's got $10 million worth of maintenance, and obviously we're not going to do $10 million worth of work on a school that we anticipate demolishing and building a new school. So I am very excited about what you brought forward. Student generation rates, I don't know how detailed they are, but you know, from a council standpoint, it is very important to us that within our UDO, we have student generation rates that we can rely on, that businesses, builders that plan on coming into our city feel comfortable with. The idea that you've come up with a different formula based on the size of the school and the square footage and how much per square foot, that's important. Another thing I think everybody needs to realize is the very, 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 very small print on a lot of these estimates. These are in 2020 dollars. That was yesterday. So those numbers have already gone up. So we need to realize that those 2020 numbers, you know, this one doesn't look too bad for $23 or $4 billion, but we all know, I mean, we've started with projects that were $8 million 2 years ago that are now $12 million, depending on the price of steel and labor and all those things that we don't have any control over. So when we're working with numbers, we need to realize that too. But I don't think, you know, the superintendent kind of alluded to it. I don't think anybody can question the fact or not agree to recognize for our city to reach the next level. And I'll say it over and over again, it's one of my favorite sayings. This school system must achieve and be perceived as one of the better school systems in the Hampton Roads area. And that will do wonders for us. So it's just a matter of everyone concentrate on the data and try to determine how we can get the most done in an efficient manner, in a timely manner for the least number of dollars, not only present dollars, but also those dollars down the road. So that's all I have. If The superintendent or the manager would like to make a closing remark based on any of the comments, maybe before we adjourn. Let's go ahead and do that, Superintendent.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mayor Duman. Definitely appreciate all the comments from our board as well as from City Council. Some key points there. Mobile units were considered in this, and that's part of the reason why, as Dr. Brooks-Buck alluded to, the different priorities that we have are listed in our CIP. It is our goal to eliminate mobile units in Suffolk Public Schools. That is one of the main things that we really discussed as this facility study was coming together. I also fully agree with what Mayor Duman said. Today's dollars. Each year that we delay any decisions, $1 million to $1.5 million added for any major project. And that's a lot of tax dollars when you look at over a 10-year period. One of the things we want to be able to look at is it's really difficult for City Council and the school board to be able to set a 10-year window on how much money is going to be available, because we do not know that based on sales revenue. That is something that we find out each and every year. One of the things that we would like to consider is for the council to be able to have a range of money that would be allocated to the school division every year. It's a lot easier when we're budgeting our checkbooks if we know this bill is coming out every year. But at the same time, we also want to be fair to the city, because we know about the $30 million threshold. We know about the AAA bond rating. So we are prepared to be able to compromise and work with the city for a plan that is beneficial and efficient for the city side, but at the same time allows us to address building new schools so we can eliminate these maintenance costs. The maintenance costs, as both Mayor Duman, Dr. Brooks-Buck, and Mr. Bennett said, the maintenance costs are the key thing that a lot of times moves schools to having poor condition at an early age. 50 years is a threshold. We want to make that clear. 50 years is a threshold if you do everything right. And so part of the reason why John F. Kennedy Middle School, for example, is moved up on our list, because the amount of dollars it's costing us right now to continue to repair it. So we want to be able to use that example. That's part of the reason why Ms. Jenkins and Mr. Riddick mentioned that school specifically. That's part of the reason why we also had our legislative visit to that school specifically. So we are really looking forward to having some action in the very near future, because we know that our budget presentation is coming up. We know that the city has to finalize their CIP and their budget presentations as well. And this facility study right here, this entire master plan, strategic plan, as Mayor Duman has called it, is very, very timely. And I have been very, very impressed and very thankful with Al Moore and his staff and the collaboration that we've had with all the meetings that we've had with Ms. Forsman, Terry Napier, RRMM, and Cooperative Strategies. A lot of work went into getting us to this place. So now it's really all about us really adding some action to what we see here in this notebook. So thank you so much, Mayor Duman and the rest of council, for giving us this platform.
City Manager?
Yes, sir. And of course, I would like to thank Dr. Gordon and his staff. And we've had, I think, a very good relationship as we've been moving through this, my short term. And I'd like to thank RRMM and Cooperative Strategies. We keep saying RRMM tonight, and we forget the Cooperative Strategies part of it. And I really appreciate what you do, David and Dwayne. So as we continue on, again, we'll be working closely together with Dr. Gordon. We do need to look at these elements and come with the plan, but we also need to balance that. We need to talk at Davenport. We need to ensure we protect our AAA. We need to move the school needs ahead along with the quality of life initiatives that the city has too. So it's going to be a balancing act and continue on, and we just need to continue to have that relationship that I think we've established, and continue to bring you the proper information as we come forward. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. City Manager. I'd like to thank everyone for their attendance. Before we adjourn, however, if you could just hold your seats for a second, I believe we have a motion for a closed meeting, and Madam Clerk, if you would read that.
Pursuant to Virginia Code Sections 2.2-3711A8 and A1, consultation with legal counsel employed by a public body regarding specific legal matters requiring the legal advice of such counsel, and the discussion, consideration, or interviews of prospective candidates for appointment, and the assignment, appointment, and performance of specific public officers or appointees of the city, specifically the appointments as shown on the attached list for vacancies or term expirations for the Early Childhood Development Commission, the Economic Development Authority of the City of Suffolk, the Fine Arts Commission, the Human Services Advisory Board, the Local Board of Building Code Appeals, the Suffolk Redevelopment Housing Authority, the Planning Council, the Tidewater Emergency Medical Services Council, and the Wetlands Board, and the Chuckatuck Borough vacancy on City Council.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Will you please call the roll?
A motion is in order.
So moved.
Oh, sorry about that.
Second.
Now you can call the roll.
Councilmember Fawcett,
Yes.
Councilmember Goldberg,
Yes.
Councilmember Johnson,
Yes.
Councilmember Ward,
Yes.
Councilmember Williams,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Bennett,
Yes.
Mayor Duman.
Yes.
The motion is approved by a vote of 7-0.
Okay, thank you very much. The work session stands adjourned.